I mean, most of my time was thinking that way. I wasn't very popular in school, so so I had to change that. It doesn't solve everything. It's not everything. Also now because of health issues, full desire has gone to a zero. I couldn't perform, and I'm not interested in it. But I still, my number one prevention to start off with is I don't associate with children. I don't, if I work with somebody and they have children, I associate with them at work. I'm not going to go over and hang out at their house. I'm uncomfortable around kids. So,
And that's good that you won't be hanging around children.
Now, we are about to watch the parole hearing for a man whose initial crime was committed in 1988. But believe me, he hasn't been serving his 100-year sentence since that time. He was actually granted parole in 1995, and since then has been revoked 9 times. Okay, so if he's granted today, it will be his 10th chance at parole. Now, what's also interesting about this case is that he initially escaped prison for his initial sentence. So that like 8-year sentence that he served about was including the reprimand for actually escaping and almost making it to the Mexico border. So I'll unpack it with those details of his escape as well at the end. But for now, let's jump in.
My name is Kelly Perry. I'm a hearing officer with the Board of Pardons and Parole. Do you mind scooting up a little bit? And I'll be conducting your hearing today. As this is an official proceeding, I do need to swear you in. So if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes,
Did you receive 7 days written notice of today's hearing?
yes,
Did you receive your blue disclosure packet?
yes,
And did you have a chance to review that?
yes,
Do you feel prepared to go forward with today's hearing?
yes.
Are there any errors or corrections I should know about in that blue disclosure packet before we begin today?
The only thing that I would say for a correction is apparently with the interviewing officer from SOTP, uh, either didn't know or wasn't, we had a miscommunication about when I told him I've done the program twice. The first time I did at SSD, the second time I did it was at Nuke in the Ogden Halfway House. And apparently he doesn't understand that they used to have inpatient programs in the halfway houses because his report all talked about just aftercare that I'd done in the community, did not mention me completing the program in the halfway house as well.
Any other errors or comments, sir?
No, that's the only one.
Okay, sir. So just to kind of tell you how today's going to go, we are going to go over that report. So you are welcome to reiterate that, but we'll go over procedurally how we got to this hearing. I'll ask you for any comments about your offenses. I'm not going to go over them individually, but ask you for any comments. We'll go over any background questions I have, institutional behavior and programming, if you were released, what that would look like. And then at the end of the hearing, if you have further questions or comments, let me know, okay? So it looks like a rehearing occurred after an evidentiary hearing. A rehearing was ordered for now with a sex offender treatment memo. It was noted that you were expected to complete sex offender treatment as evaluated to be appropriate prior to this hearing. Does that sound procedurally correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any comments about your offenses for which you are currently incarcerated?
No.
Do you have any comments about your risks of why they occurred?
I think the biggest issue was the people I was hanging around with. The fact that they were all felons, and so what I need to do going forward is need to break that. I've done such great time in prison. Everybody I know is from prison. I don't know people on the streets anymore, but I need to just make a clean break from that and create new, appropriate relationships. Uh, why I don't I hate to even bring this up, but I've started attending church here. I've been baptized while I've been here. And those are the kind of people that I want to associate with because they're going to be uplifting. They're going to help keep me on the straight and narrow. And there's not going to be, I'm not going to run into the criminal thinking. You can't meet good people in bars, not that I can go to bars anyway, but I mean, you wouldn't want to go there to meet good people. So I figure the dealing with the congregation, at least initially, and some mental health counseling moving forward, be to my best interest.
I mean, sorry, and I want to make sure I'm understanding you, right? I think there are people who go to bars that there is nothing wrong with them. You have DUIs, so
Yeah.
I don't think you should be going to bars.
Right.
But and obviously you have the sex offense. What do you think your risk was in regarding the sex offense?
Sex offense, I'd say my risk is relatively slow. I mean, considering from 1988 to date, there have been no new sex offenses. I think that speaks volumes, and that's after I completed the program here at SSD. I worked with Dr. Blake Locke, and he was a tough guy to please. And he really made you think. And that's where I gained my greatest, changing my thinking, changing my behaviors. And
What did you change specifically?
specifically just the way I thought. Growing up with the environment I grew up in, being sexually assaulted by my brothers, I had a lot of distorted thinking and a bunch of irrational beliefs. And he challenged us to go back in and change that. I remembered in one of our groups, one of the things he asked us, he says, "What makes you different?" And, and it was a pretty good sized group at that time. I think there were 13 of us in there at that time. And he went around and asked each one of us, "What makes you different from anybody else out on the street?" And one guy said, "Oh, well, I had a low self-esteem." He says, "I have a low self-esteem. I've never sexually assaulted anybody." And another guy went on that, I was viewing pornography. He says there's millions of people that view pornography every day and they don't go out and sexually assault someone. What makes you different? So, and as everybody went around, he shot him down on it. He says, everybody's got those problems. What makes you guys different? Why did you choose to sexually offend? And so I looked at Doc. I said, "Look, give me a week." I says, "I'll come back." And I says, "I've got to think about this." I said, "That's a really good question." And so I applied myself, and throughout the week, I thought about it, and every time I come up, it was this. Well, no, other people have that issue. Why am I different? And I finally figured it out. And so the next week I went back into group. I told him I had an issue. We talked about it. He said, "Well, what was it?" I said, "It's that question you asked last week." He said, "What question?" I said, "Well, and what makes us different?" He says, "You have an answer?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, what is it?" I said, "I was preoccupied with sexual thoughts and fantasies. I mean, that was my entire life. Part of that led up to having that irrational belief was, one, the sexual assault by my brothers. Two, when I got into high school, everybody in the locker room was talking about, well, they're having sex with this girl, that girl, and whatever. And I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me because I'm not having all this, not recognizing that they're lying just the same, but I bought into it. And so growing up with that, having sexual fantasies constantly, thinking, and so that led into the deviancy. And then it was a long lifeline of that deviancy before I finally acted out the first time.
And sorry, I'm making notes of everything you're saying. I don't want you to think I'm not listening, okay?
Yeah, no, it's not okay.
No, I'm making notes of everything you're saying. I just want you to know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Doc, so at that time, Dr. Sanchez was over the program. And with him was, if you had a child offense, your number one risk offense had to be a deviant sexual attraction to children. And so then he went around and asked everybody in the group, he says, out of all you guys, how many do you think that should be a risk factor for you guys? And only a couple of guys raised their hands. He says, if it wasn't for Dr. Sanchez having this guideline that you have to follow, he says that should be every one of yours number one risk factor. And he says, and in all the years I've been doing sex offender therapy, he says nobody has ever stated that as being a risk factor. And it was. I mean, most of my time was thinking that way. I wasn't very popular in school. So, so I had to change that. It doesn't solve everything. It's not everything. Also now because of health issues, sexual desire has gone to a 0. You know, I couldn't sexually perform and I'm not interested in it. But I still, you know, my number one prevention to start off with is I don't associate with children. You know, I don't, if I work with somebody and they have children, I associate with them at work. I'm not going to go over and hang out at their house. I'm uncomfortable around kids. So, you know,
And that's good that you won't be hanging around children. I do want to make sure I get to the sex offender status report. It provided a risk level of average risk. It said that you had completed the sex offender treatment program in 2005. And then it said community treatment, which you talked about. It noted that your current parole violations remain a concern and that your current recidivism scores place him in the average risk. It said additionally that you were an unfavorable candidate for treatment at this time, as he has made his intentions clear to not engage in or complete sex offender treatment while in the prison.
yeah, and that's why
Why is that?
I don't see where I would gain anything more if I've completed the program twice. I haven't committed a sex offense since 88. I think that speaks volumes about where my risk assessment should be. Why his viewpoint is that I'm not a good candidate for sex offender therapies. I says I didn't want to do the program here, you know, because that was the first question he asked me. He said, "Do you want to do the program here?" And I told him no, and I explained why. And then that was basically the end of our interview. And then he just pulled everything out of my jacket from there.
So are you saying you will not do sex offender treatment?
Not why I'm here, no,
So even if the
At-
board were to order it again with the rehearing, you will not do it?
no. If you want to order, which is mandatory by law, the aftercare I have to do that. But I'm not going to redo an entire program a third time.
Sir, and I understand your point that you have not been committed of a sex offense, a new sex offense. But the report talked about your behavior on your 9th parole, right? Where you were unsuccessfully discharged from sex offender treatment, that you had 4 cell phones, that you had numerous videos of young adult males engaging in sexual relations, that you had admitted to using meth. I mean, this is obviously concerning behavior, right? On your last parole.
Yeah, well, the cell phones, I had 2 cell phones. The other belonged to the guy that lived next door that totaled my car and was incarcerated at the time. And I held on to his property. I had most of it in a small storage unit, what I could fit in there. The other cell phones were his. I was using one of his because my cell phone service had stopped down. You know, I didn't tell my parole officer about it. I told the POs that showed up that was searching. And I don't know if that information got passed on to my parole officer or not. I have no idea. But I had 2 cell phones.
Why did you have 2?
One was a work phone. Okay, that was used specifically so because I work from home and Maximus Federal, they have a program because you see basically if I was sitting at a desk at Maximus Federal, my screen would look like would look like what would you find on my screen. But there's a program, you punch into that and it would give you a number and it gives you a time frame that you have to be logged in so many seconds. And if you don't log in, then you have to wait for the next number to come up and then punch that number in to be able to log into their system. So that one was used strictly for work. The other one I had, which was a plus phone, there was 2 of them. The one I was using and then mine that was turned off. And on my list that I got back from AT&P, that phone wasn't on the list. So I don't know if they didn't find it or if it got misplaced or what. And then there was 2 Apple phones. And I didn't see the Apple phone on there and I didn't see.
So are you saying that the stuff that so why did you not complete sex offender treatment on your last parole? Because it says you were unsuccessfully discharged.
Okay, I was going to it. The therapist I had, we were doing it over the phone. And we had some issues about her getting paid. I changed from my Medicaid from one to another, and I gave her all the numbers. I gave her photocopies of front and backs of my cards and everything. She's saying I'm not paying her, and that's in the report from to AP&P. She says for a year she never got paid, and I just don't believe it. So we had some issues there. So she just discharged me when I come back in, then she discharged me as incomplete and wrote a whole bunch of nasty stuff.
That's
So I done everything I could to get her paid if she wasn't getting paid. And I go through these really crazy mood swings. So that's why I wanted.
Are you currently taking any mental health medication?
Not here, no. The last time they put me on some stuff here, it made me pretty violent. You know, I was at the drop of a hat, I'd be wanting to fight everybody. So I got back off of it. And because of the prison environment, there's a lot of restrictions on what they can and cannot give you.
Okay. All right. So in regards to your board packet, I showed that if you are paroled, you'd like to go to a halfway house and work at a call center. Is that still the plan, sir?
Yeah, that's what I'd have to do.
Okay.
And at least until I could get my retirement started. And even then, I'm still going to have to work, you know,
Okay.
part-time. I have completed, I didn't bring my certificates with me, but you can probably see it. I did get the career builders certificate on that. I got the interpretership completed. I've done the enduring skills, which is a lot of the work related skills that, you know, personal, interpersonal skills completed. The only thing I haven't been able to take the final exam on that because it's missing on the notebooks. And I've notified the notebook people that, hey, you know, I need this put in there. I'm also working on the master plan. I'm also working on electrical, plumbing, and HVAC.
All right, sir, those are all of my questions. From here, I'm a hearing officer. I make recommendations. The board ultimately decides. They're made up of 5 members. 3 of them have to come to one decision. That's the decision of the board. Should get that in writing within 2 to 4 weeks for you.
Yeah.
Do you have-
Especially this time of the year, got a lot of holidays coming up, so.
Do you have any closing comments or questions for myself or for the board, sir?
Nope, that'll do it.
Well, I appreciate you attending this hearing. We'll go ahead and conclude. Thank you.
All right, I'm glad to tell you that they denied parole and he won't have another chance at a hearing for 2 more years. And it's like, wow, about time. Is that, 9 revocations. How do you not get an habitual offender and just lock him up forever? It's mind-boggling to me. And like I said, I'm going to share with you the reports of when he escaped prison. So, and what happened there, I think it's fascinating. Listen to this. So the prisons were overflowing in Utah, even back then in the late 80s, 90s. So what they were doing is they were handing off their prisoners to privately owned jails in Texas, and paying them $37.50 a day. If you don't think this was like, just another way for everybody to make money on each other, okay? In 1995, when he escaped, minimum wage, I looked this up, was $4.25 an hour. And they're paying $37.50 a day to house these inmates. Anyways, that's a different point. He escaped, right? And it was like 15 days later, they caught him in Louisiana. And they only caught him because he was arrested in Louisiana for stealing a car. So he was in jail, and Utah was calling all the jails in all the bordering states, and they found him. I'll read through you of how because it was a pretty crazy story in itself. But let's just unpack this first and then go through the different revocation history that he had. And thank you, Sir Richard, for making all of this possible in terms of the research and the spreadsheets and the whole thing. So this is what he does. He's quite an expert at these parole hearings by now because he's done so many of them, right? And it's interesting because I think it gives us insight, especially a unique insight into what it's like at these sex offender programs and how they all get taught and learn how to say things. And he goes on by kind of repeating by memorization what the instructor says. And the instructor goes around and says, well, you're blaming it on this, but we don't all go do this to a child. You're blaming it on this, but people normal who have those problems don't go and do this to a child. And it's quite interesting that he said that because that's what our chat is always saying, like where I was like, well, I've done this for, I was addicted to this and I never did that to a child. We say the same thing. So it was nice to hear that. But you're waiting for it to get to the point. And then his primary point, he says, well, my brother did this to me, and then also I was in high school and all the guys in the locker room were saying they were sleeping with all these girls and I wasn't. They were just lying. I didn't know that, but that really messed me up, I thought. And because of that, I did this to a child. It's like, what? Really? Wow. Huh. So, I mean, I guess every kid who wasn't macking it in high school just becomes a deviant, right? What? Like, oh my God, he still learned nothing. And then when it goes, to him talking about trying to talk through why he had 4 cell phones and why he has content on his phone with Young and why he has, and he goes through this, they call it gaslighting thing, without any ending. He never even concludes. Remember, he would have had a lot of time to try to come up with a story or an excuse. And this just goes to show how his mind works. Really, many felons' minds work. He couldn't even come to conclusion of his story. He went on this word salad thing about phones and really just tailed off into nothingness. It never concluded. He never actually made up a reason. It's just, I think it's fascinating in a way. And Kelly does such a great job interviewing. She didn't even fight him on the fact that he had 4 phones. Okay, well, you had 2 phones then. So tell us why you had a second phone. And he's well, with work, and then he forgets. I think he starts talking about having 4 phones, and his buddy totaled his car, and we see this all the time. Word salad gaslighting. So this is 10/31/1995 is his first time he's paroled for his initial crime, right? And the only reason he even got so much time because again his initial offense was in 80. What was it in 80? Let's see here. 88 was when he was convicted initially. He was released 2000. Well, I don't know. It shows here that he's released in 95. I don't know. He has a rescission hearing in 96, it shows. Then his parole is granted in 2006. Then he has a violation hearing. So he lasts a full year because he violates in 2007. It seems he has parole in 2009, a warrant for his arrest in 2012, right? Then again, a violation in 2015, violation in 2017, violation in 2019, another, I think, violation in 2019. He gets released in 2020, gets arrested 2021, so he has another violation. I mean, as you can see, it just goes on and on and on and on, and I don't even think that's all of it. But let's go to his prison escape because I think this is quite interesting. So it starts off with this article written in 1995. Utahs can't escape paying for escapees. So this even gets attention because while the inmates escaped, Utah was still paying the $37.50 to this Texas private prison. And they thought that was unfair because it's like, wait a minute, they escaped your jail and you're still charging us for an inmate that you're not taking care of. So that's quite an interesting article, right? Utah taxpayers will continue to pay operators of privately run Texas prison to house 2 Utah inmates even while the duo is on the lam. Right? If it wasn't taxpayer dollar related, maybe no one talks about this. Who cares that one was a murderer and one did this to children? Utah pays Dove Development $37.50 per day for each of the 100 inmates sent to its Crystal City, Texas prison in July to ease crowded conditions in Utah's prison. Scott Carver, Deputy Director of Institutional Operation, said even though the inmates aren't in custody, Utah still pays Dove for their care. Dove, however, must pay for the cost of searching for the inmates. Okay, well, at least that. But still, why wouldn't Utah pay? But anyways, who now face felony charges in Texas. 3 inmates escaped Saturday while painting the lobby of the private detention center. One of the inmates, James Brown, was found hiding in a brush a few hours later, and Carver said he was very happy to be back in custody. He traveled about 11 miles to get 4 miles from the facility, Carver said, while outside the prison's walls. Brown confronted rattlesnakes, was treed by wild pigs, and so he's climbing up a tree because wild pigs are trying to get to him. It's actually quite funny, this guy's escape experience. And from his knees to his feet, it looked like he'd been beaten with wire brush because of the cactus. So he did not have a good experience. But the other two, they got out. And it's interesting that they ditched their buddy, huh? So they actually escaped for like 10 days and he didn't. And they all escaped at the same time. He was cussing the desert and threatening to sue when officials located him. Carver said Brown also reportedly offered to let other prisoners know how unforgiving the Texas desert can be if others are considering escape. The other 2 escapees, convicted wife killer Donald Allen Noble and convicted child, who we just saw his parole hearing, are still at large. Officials say Noble is somewhat of a survivalist and may be more well suited than others to survive Texas' brutal deserts. Correction Director Lane McCotter and Dove officials told him they believed that they had the pier boxed in a 20 square mile area of the desert. The men ran different directions when they fled the lobby of the building, but Carver said one sighting of 2 inmates walking along railroad tracks had been reported. Brown, now in Zavala County Jail, faces escape charges, blah, blah, blah. So they weren't boxed in a 20 square mile radius because they made it to Louisiana, and that's where we're going to go to part 2. So now this is November 3rd, 1995, while the last article was written October 18th, 1995. 2 Utah inmates who escaped from private prison facility in Texas were arrested in Louisiana, good old Louisiana, Wednesday afternoon for car theft. Utah correction officials got wind that the pair had been arrested somewhere in Louisiana, but weren't sure if police there knew they had 2 dangerous felons in their custody. So, local officials spent hours calling every county jail in Louisiana and said correction spokesman Jack Ford, as it turns out, convicted murderer Donald Allen Noble and convicted child Broden were in jail at Lake Charles, Louisiana. Imagine if they had somehow bonded out or something. They're just horrible criminals. It's like, could you imagine if you are facing life in prison and you make it all the way to Louisiana, would you even allow yourself to get put in jail? But I guess you do, hoping you'll bond out. They were arraigned Thursday morning on charges of resisting arrest, possession of a stolen vehicle, possession of stolen property, switching license plates on a motor vehicle. They were booked into jail under the names Tracy Nilsson and James Hutchinson. That's great. The pair was sent to Crystal City, Texas, with 98 other prisoners to ease Utah's crowded prison system and escape from the lobby. And so even with his escape charges, and this happened in 1995, he was still paroled. I mean, he was still paroled, even with this additional escape charge. It's just pretty amazing, huh? Okay, we're going to jump into one more hearing. And this hearing, it's going to blow the mind. It's literally one of those things, if you didn't see it, you couldn't believe it. And that's because it is what a father did to his disabled daughter. I mean, cognitively disabled biological daughter. It only happened in 2022 and already up for parole. How you can essay your cognitively disabled daughter and receive just a 15-year sentence and have parole eligibility after 2 years, it's something us sheeple can't understand, of course. Now, something happened with this actually about a week worth of recordings where the video footage was not showing. We only had audible, but luckily we had audible. But there was a 1 second in this footage where we were able to see the roach. So I was able to grab a snapshot of that, and we're going to just stick that there for the entirety of this hearing. So we're not going to have the normal video feed. Sadly, we're going to have to look at the roach. You might just want to close your eyes, but it's not the visual that's important. It's the audio, and we're about to hear something that just doesn't make any sense. And as always, I'll share the results with you at the end.
It is now your turn. I'm very anxious to hear what you have to say.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to say that I am speaking on behalf of and I asked her if she wanted me to say anything for her, and she just said that I'm quoting her. It says, Dustin's mom told me that his friend said, when Dustin gets out of prison, he wants to come kill me. And my mom wants to come kill me, and my mom makes me where I don't want to sleep at night because it's to the point where I'm really scared to go anywhere, even stores. And I keep having nightmares about going into a cabin with my family. When Dustin shows up, he's going to kill me and my whole family. I got out of the cabin before he found me, and he told me that I was next to be killed. My anxiety gets really bad when I go into stores and everywhere else. End of her quote. So Alana's disability makes it hard for her to move past things. For her, the trauma that Dustin has caused just kind of replays over and over again in her mind. He used her disability to take advantage of her, and because of that, Alana has had extreme anxiety and panic attacks, especially. Sorry.
Can you tell me what the, it's clear that she was a vulnerable adult under the statute. Are you in a position to share with me exactly what that particular vulnerability is?
So she has an intellectual disability. So she's very easily influenced. Like she'll never drive. She'll never. She's basically like a child mentally. So just very easily taken advantage of. And it just kind of, like I said, something that happened 5 years ago happened, yesterday for her. I don't know why, but it just kind of.
So is she receiving treatment or therapy in connection with the trauma of the crimes against her?
She is. She goes at least once a month. But like I said, I don't know if it's because of the disability or what, but it's not seeming to help. It's just still right there, fresh in her memory.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Do you-
that's a heartbreaking situation, Miss Dennison.
it is, and when Dustin was sentenced, I kind of feel like they told me not to push for a harsher sentence because they didn't want him to walk. But then when he was actually sentenced, the judge was like, well, why didn't you ask for more?
Mm-hmm. Well, you had the truth of the matter is, he's been convicted of 2 second-degree felonies. They carry a term of up to 15 years. They were imposed concurrently, and so I mean, the judge did what he could, which is to say he committed Mr. Slaughter to prison, and now the board is here to determine when and under what conditions he could be released. So you shouldn't beat yourself up over that. I mean, you appeared here today with a moving and heartrending presentation, and the board will take that into consideration. Anything else you'd like to say before we turn to Mr. Slaw?
Just that just my biggest regret is not protecting her from
this monster that stole her innocence. So, it's just our wish that he is not given parole at this time.
All right, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you very much for what, for what I'm sure was a difficult presentation. Anything further?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Slaw, you've heard what I regard as a heartbreaking story, and took advantage of somebody who had severe intellectual disabilities, and worse, as you've heard from Ms. Dustin, she's in a position to be afraid to have you released. You, according to the record, you said some things that continue to haunt both mother and daughter. You heard her. What do you think?
Well, I don't recall saying that because I've never said that I would or that I would kill her and all that. I don't know where she's coming up with that. But I just, I mean, I feel really severely bad. I beat myself up tremendously for what I've done. And within these last 4 or 3 years that I've been here in prison, I've done so much to better myself. I'm not that same person that I was when I first came in here. I've completed MRT. I've completed Just for Men, anger management. I'm scheduled to start anger management again here in like a week.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot of changing. I would imagine, that I can see for myself.
Well, in fairness, for the record, I was unable to find anything in the record where you had actually made any threats.
Yeah,
And we're going to let bygones be bygones on that one. But I am interested in having you tell the board and tell the victim and her mother that at the bottom of your heart, you feel terrible about what happened and that you pose no ongoing threat to either one of them. Think you can do that?
yes, sir.
All right. What are your plans when you're released?
My plan is that I'm sure that I probably will have to go to Vernal, to parole to Vernal for a short time. But my plan is that I want to change locations where I'm at. I want to go to Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Yeah, I saw that. You've been on disability for 20 some odd years. Are you able to work?
I can work, but it's going to have to be part-time. I was actually on Social Security when I got locked in here. I'd only been on disability for like a month before I got locked in here. I had just got my third payment. Or no, excuse me. I had just got my second payment from
Mhm.
Social Security.
Yeah. You're in a program right now. How are you doing in that?
We're about a month in right now, and I've learned so much.
Mhm. According to this psychological report, that'll take another 8 to 12 months to complete.
Yes. So I figured out, so it's footprints I'm in.
Mhm.
And, I've heard somebody say that I don't know how true it is, but somebody said that it's like between 5 to 6 months,
Mhm.
just depending on how everything goes.
So what have you learned so far from your participation in that program and the program that preceded it?
I've learned to be a better person, and I've learned to just like not take advantage of people like I have,
Mhm.
and I've learned to like manage my time.
Have you gained any insight into uh, what allowed you to take advantage of an intellectually disabled girl?
I feel really bad for even doing that. Um, I I don't know what was going on in my head. It it you know, if I could like if I could tell them on how sorry I am from the bottom of my heart, I really would. I would, you know, I would even do anything in the world. You know, I know that she probably doesn't, you know, even though that my daughter doesn't want nothing to do with me, which that's fine. I just want her to know that her dad still loves her from the bottom of his heart.
Well, it's a heartbreaking situation, and you have done some damage that I hope is not irreparable.
No, it's not.
All right, you answered all my questions. Anything further you think the board ought to consider?
Not that I can think of.
All right, well, you'll be receiving notice in writing, and I don't know what the board's gonna do, but I will tell you, I would not anticipate that you're eligible for a release until you've successfully completed a program. All right, feel good about that?
Okay, like I said, I've completed like all kinds of like,
You've done a ton, but the program that you're currently in is a minimum prerequisite to your being released on a sexual offense.
yes,
So you're gonna have to do a bang up job on that.
yes.
All right?
And that's what I plan on doing.
All right. And it will certainly be the case that if and when you're released, a condition of that will be that you stay away from this poor girl and her mother. You think you can do that?
Yes, sir.
All right. If there's nothing further, we'll conclude the hearing. Thank you.
Utah granted parole. Now it's on condition that he completes his sex offender program, which I'm sure he will, and he will be released November 2025. So at the time of this hearing, 11 months, and he will be walking. Literally, Utah, what does someone have to do to get long sentences? What? What is wrong with you? I know we don't understand. Again, we're just sheeple. We don't have PhDs. We're not in government. Clearly, we don't have the intellectual ability to understand why someone who does this to their biological, mentally disabled child that they can get released. His conviction date was 5/3/2022. He has parole in 2024 and release in 2025. Now, they said 5 years. So I guess, it was through the courts. He was in jail. So he ends up doing a total of 5 or 6 years. I mean, if he had done this just to an intellectually disabled adult, you would think that you'd get at least 20 years. But when it's your own child, I mean, what? And then, the ingenuity of this whole thing, this parole board interviewer, by the way, like I don't like him. What was there to like? He kept it was like mind-boggling. I didn't know she was the biological child. I had to check in with Richard. I said, Richard, was this stepdaughter? Because like the parole board officer keeps just alluding to it as like a child. which, you know what, I'm fine. I'm okay with. Though he shouldn't deserve the credit to say, oh, the disco. He said, I love her. You disgusting roach. You do not have the right to utter those words ever again. You lost that right. But the idea, like, he just the way that he used his words. He said, in all fairness, I did not see it in the record when he said that he threatened to kill him. So let bygones be bygones. Like, what a poor word choice. Bygones be bygones. I mean, if you want to say, look, there are so many ways you could have worded it. Kelly, my favorite board interviewer, it would have been, you just didn't need to say that. You could have said, well, you could have just jumped to the chase. What would you tell the victim so they shouldn't be fearful of you? And so he does say that. And I guess he saw something, we didn't have the visual, but he could tell that the guy, I guess, wasn't going to say anything. And then he goes on and moves to the next thing. So the victim still never even got that verbal reassurance that he's not going to harm them. He actually never stated it. Oh, then it didn't help. It didn't help listening, to mom who's broken apart and they're saying that she has therapy once a month. And then saying, I don't know if it's the intellectual disability, but for her, it's like it happened yesterday. And the therapy doesn't seem to help. And it's like, I just really, mom, is no one talking to her? It's not, it could feel like it happened yesterday to anybody. And therapy once a month, that's not enough. God, that's 12 times a year, assuming you never miss an appointment. And the other thing I want to add to it was when you hear her talk about how the judge said, why didn't you ask for more time? And, my guess is that there was paraphrasing there. My guess is that, like, the judge said something that probably on the line of maybe, well, you agreed to the plea deal, right? The DA, the defense, mom probably has no idea what's going on. Not probably, I believe, we see this with sophisticated, no one knows what's going on. It's the first time it's happening to them. And the DA and the ADA and the defense attorney, they make a deal quickly in the back room. They tell the victim, hey, this is good. This is a good deal. I promise this is good. And the victim says, okay. And they sign it. And then the judge just the whole thing happens in seconds, right? And I mean, maybe in this case, there was years because he was going to make her go on the stand, whatever. But the whole deal making happens in a second. And then this board interviewer says, well, the judge did the best he could. It's like, no, he didn't. There were two sentences, each for 15 years. He ran them concurrent. He could have done them consecutive. So no, the judge didn't do the best he could. And don't just say that because it's not true. It was 2 counts of forcible essay, 15 years. The full term date is 2036. He did not need to run them consecutively. So, if I say consecutive, I mean concurrent. He didn't need to run them concurrent. Could have ran them consecutive, and he didn't. So again, another two-faced, just a bunch of lies. It's lies. And if there's not a case that would be so easy for a judge to throw the book at a monster like this, it would be this one. It's just so easy. It's so easy. And there's no redeeming factors in this cockroach. It's just, come on, guys. But there you have it. He'll get released. Because who cares about the victims? Who cares when what you can care about is evil? And like I said, if you didn't see it, you probably wouldn't believe it, because how could it be that those put in charge to protect us do such a crappy job at it? And with that, I'll let you go.
That's my biggest regret is not protecting her from this monster that stole her innocence. So, it's just our wish that he is not given parole at this time.
All right, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you very much for,
Went around and asked each one of us, what makes you different from anybody else out on the street? And one guy said, oh, well, I had a low self-esteem. He says, I have a low self-esteem. I've never sexually assaulted anybody. And another guy went on that, well, I was viewing pornography. He says there's millions of people that view pornography every day and they don't go out and sexually assault someone. What makes you different? So, and as everybody went around, he shot him down on it. He says, everybody's got those problems. What makes you guys different?